haven't been to Sudo. For the geeks in the audience, I'm sure you know that Sudo is the Unix or Linux superuser command that gives you superuser access to your machine. Google Sudo is about giving you some of the secrets of superuser access to entrepreneurial success. So that's what we're trying to do. And we found that one of the best ways to kind of convey information is through basically interesting conversations with entrepreneurs who have been there and done that before you. Before I start today, though, I'm very, very excited to announce that yesterday, our federal government came out with the competitiveness agenda, where they have made a very good recommendation with respect to employee stock option programs. And I'm very happy to say that it's going to make it a lot easier for startups to basically incentivize employees with stock options, which obviously for the last few years has not been an option. So it's a very good step in the right direction for encouraging startups and entrepreneurs here in Australia. Startup Oz, of which I'm one of the directors, has been one of the organizations that's been working very hard, dare I say, lobbying or advocating for the needs of the tech startup community the last year or so to help make this a reality. So we're very, very, very happy to see that that change has actually been implemented. So effective July next year, startups can once again start using equity in the form of stock options to basically compensate employees. Anyway, enough about that. Tonight, we have Meg Dennis, who's the CEO and co-founder of WorkDivision. She's also done a couple of other startups in the past, but I'd like to welcome Meg to the show. Really, I think, Meg, I'd like to let you have an opportunity to do a self-introduction.
Sure.
And then we'll take it from there.
Okay. So my name's Meg. I've been part of a couple of startups in the past. I was fortunate enough to work on some startup teams, which was a really good learning ground for me. So Hutchison, the first 3G network in the world, and then Virgin Mobile, a couple of startups there as well. Then I co-founded a couple of my own businesses. So, and that's the reason that I really love being an entrepreneur and working with tech startups is, you know, the highlights of my career have been the days of my life when I've launched, you know, brand new world first innovation. And I think I was saying to you before, but the other reason that I do this is because I vehemently believe in innovation. Like if we don't create, we're only consuming. And I'm a farm girl, so I learned really early on the impact of supply and demand on the economy of resources. And when I'm reading the news of a morning, that one of the first things that hits you is how our economy is performing based on the resources, right? So like I really worry about Australia's future, and I'm concerned that we will undoubtedly send ourselves into recession if we don't invest and create global, scalable, repeatable technologies and solutions.
Well, the good news is there's lots and lots of entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs that actually want to go out and create products and services for the world. But tell us about your latest startup, WorkDivision. You've been doing it now for about 2 years.
Yep.
So what does WorkDivision do, and what problem are you solving?
Sure. So WorkDivision, we've developed an administration as a service platform, which is an innovation in business process automation. So to break it down, the technology has been designed for financial services and government where they have a large customer life cycle to service, and it's still largely manual and very paper intense. So if you were to go to any government website, you think of councils, big government agencies, superannuation, financial services businesses, they still all have a lot of processes and they use a lot of paper to exchange information with and from their clients and users. So we have an all-in-one platform that combines auto read, workflow and online forms. And a business today would need to engage 3 separate vendors to be able to achieve that sort of same level of business efficiency. And so I suppose our secret sauce, you always want to know what the secret sauce is. We've applied a unique approach to business processing, and we opened up a new workforce model, which is a crowdsource to do that work.
So you're using crowdsourcing to solve somewhat traditional problems. Yeah,
look, I mean, the worker problem is that it's office bound, right? So a lot of this work is office bound, and Leo Venegas, who's also here, he's the co-founder of the business. He developed this idea when his wife was looking to go back to work after having a baby. And this is common for many people that have children. They can't find work that suits their family hours or needs, and it's office bound. So that was sort of the worker problem. And the business problem is that it's really hard to scale human efficiency. So the more you can automate, the more efficient businesses are. And what we're trying to do is enable businesses to double in size while still maintaining the same resource base. And this crowdsource concept, which I call the future of work, opens up a new way of working. So imagine if you could work when and where you wanted to work. Like I was a checkout chick when I was at uni, and it was such a crappy job, and I had a really mean boss, and I like really hated the whole experience. And I sit on the train and I see uni students getting off at UTS, working on the way to study. So imagine if they could be working, doing some administration work on the platform through a crowdsource to pay their way through uni.
Something a bit more
quite
exciting.
Cool, yeah. And it's not just limited to Australia. The demographic here would be sort of mums and people that need to top up their income, people in between jobs, uni students. But overseas, it's a completely different demographic again, and we can tap into that.
So tell us a little bit about how you've acquired your first customers.
Okay, so we're a B2B play, and a lot of businesses don't go into that enterprise space because it is so challenging. Like we're up against the big blue IBM solutions, and it's really hard to crack. But
with big marketing budgets.
Yeah, absolutely. We're just a small team and no brand, and no one knows us.
Small team, no brand.
Yeah, no money,
big
no brand.
Yeah. So how do you do
nothing.
it? Don't despair.
No.
Yeah.
So how do we do it? So it's all based on network and relationship. So LinkedIn is my favorite tool. Like you can access.
I have to say, I linked to Meg for the first time today, and I think she reciprocated within a few minutes. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah, I'm on that thing. That's the best source of leads for a B2B business that anyone can access. So it's we acquire them through network, and it's all about relationship. Unfortunately for us, our sales cycle is long. It's like minimum 12 months, and it can be up to 2 years if you're hitting a business in between their funding cycle. So the larger enterprises, they'll have their whole year of budget prioritized and allocated. And if we hit them in the middle of that allocation before the funding cycle, then we've got to wait. So yeah,
that can be tough on a
really
startup. I mean, managing cash flow when these long sales cycles.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. We're very lean, very lean.
Well, tell us about that. You were telling me earlier that you've kind of you essentially adapt your headcount to meet demand. So
yeah, look, I have a bit of a talent pipeline. So I have my dream team of people that I've known them before, I know of them, or I've worked with them in some capacity. And I've essentially lined up most of them to say, when the business goes through its growth stages, I'm going to be coming to you to fulfill certain roles in the business. But we also use pools of contractors. And, I think we're really lucky. I think Lee and I, we look for like the best people. We don't scrimp on people. And for that, sometimes you have to pay, like, you get what you pay for, right? So it's all about choosing the right people. You choose the right people, then you will save money ultimately in the long run.
Well, tell us a little bit of how you choose the right people, because I think a lot of people say, oh yeah, it's all about the people. You've probably heard that about how many times a day? People, team, get the team right. The right team will do amazing things.
Yeah.
I think we all believe that. The question is, how do you achieve that?
How do you do it? Okay. Actually,
what's your secrets?
Okay, so there's two parts to it. You've got to get the right people in the first place, and the second part is how do you retain them. So it's attracting the talent in the first place, and I kind of use three guidelines. So I look for people that have a benchmark. So they've had some kind of, ideally it's a startup experience, but for me, my benchmark was Virgin. Like I loved working at Virgin. It was really, they were small teams and worked on startup teams. So it was a really good benchmark and experience for me to aspire to. So, if you're taking on someone and you can see they've got it helps manage the expectations. I also look for people that have had some life experience and they understand that investment of effort versus return and reward. And then, I suppose in the retention of staff, there's sort of three things there on that side, which is a day-to-day thing. It's it's sort of aligning the expectations and the milestones together jointly. So, you know, regularly you'll start a role in a corporate and the manager just decides what you've got to do. And I think
that sounds so easy. Yes, align, you know, expectations, but the devil's in the details.
Yeah. Well, and check it regularly. So, you know, we've got a new team member here. Jackie's here tonight as well.
Jackie, where's Jackie? There you go. Say
You
hi to
know,
Jackie.
we will sit down every Friday and we will look at what the goals are and we rate them. How are we both tracking towards them? You know, and one of the goals for Jackie is to achieve certain number of sales within a certain period. And we look at it together and we understand what are the barriers. So what is it that's blocking it? What rating do we both give it jointly about how achievable it is to reach that target? So, you know, if you've ever worked in a corporate, like that just gets dictated to you. So if you can have it in a constant dialogue so that you're evolving it. And I'm understanding the challenges. So I've said to Jackie, you bring me the barriers so that we can try and overcome them.
Jackie, is she understanding your challenges?
And then I think the other thing is startups really offer individuals, anyone joining the team, flexibility, right? So you don't have to work those conventional business hours. And like I like to walk the talk about that future of work concept. I don't care what hours someone works, so long as they do the things they say they're going to do, and they deliver on their commitments.
I think a lot of us would agree that employees need to have the flexibility to kind of balance, you know, work and life.
Yeah.
But there's always a but. There's still a need for people to kind of congregate, come together. It's when that magic happens. So kind of, you've still got to create opportunities, right?
Yeah.
For those, that serendipity where those aha moments.
Yeah, of course. In fact, I love it that we work together. We do work in an office. But if it works for family reasons, or you know, I go to the gym every day, and that's got to factor in somewhere. And if that means that, you know, I leave at 4:30 so that I can go and have a training session, but then I go home and I work later, that flexibility is wonderful. People love it. It's great. It's great to be able to work around some of the commitments that you have in your life.
Yeah, no, I think most people would agree with that. WorkDivision is actually your second startup. A few years ago, you'd had another startup called Leopard Labs.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that first startup, and in particular, what you learned from that first startup.
God.
That was the one right out of version, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I could spend all night telling you what we did wrong, and 5 minutes what we did right.
That's useful information.
Yeah.
Well, Top learnings.
Okay. I would say there's sort of like five things. I think it's about 5 things that we should have invested a little bit more time in. So spending the time and money on a good lawyer to get the shareholding structure right and get it documented, because that thing is there for the bad times, not the good times. So, you know, be clear. I think a lot of businesses just want to get that off the shelf thing, and it may not cover exactly, especially when you've got incoming. So our shareholding agreement, we did actually fortunately have some good advice, and we did cover ourselves on one aspect of sort of what would happen in a particular funding scenario, but in other aspects we weren't entirely covered. So that's a big learning. The second one is to begin with the end in mind, and that's a Stephen Covey thing, right? Like a 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but I still love it. It's we didn't like, if you don't know where you're going, how will you know what steps to take to get there? And the result was a kind of vague, undefined outcome. So I really think, like, recommend start with the end in mind and then build the business plan back from that. Treat it like a project. So like a startup is essentially a project where the management of those finite resources and funds to an execution plan and a strategy is critical, like more than any other project, right? You've got a hard limit on that. There's, you know, when the funding runs out, unless you've been successful in raising. And I think, you know, the other 2 things would be like choose your stakeholders very carefully, do due diligence on them.
And stakeholders meaning fellow investors, employees,
anyone joining the team, anyone that you're going to give equity to. So once you give that equity away, you're not getting it back. Like, it's like owning a house and having a stake in it. And then I think the last thing would be, and this is current in this business, is that do proper due diligence on the barriers to entry in research to make sure that you can overcome them. In the first business, we were bound by handset manufacturers. So there wasn't an app store then. I know that sounds so old, but there wasn't an app store then, and we had to rely on handset manufacturers. And there's a handful of them, right, in Australia, and the decisions aren't even made here. They're made like over in, well, it was Nokia that we were trying to crack into. So that was like over in Europe. So that would probably be my top 5.
So do you think if you'd actually understood, I guess, the end when you start, do you think it would have been reasonable to analyze, gee, I'm working on a proprietary operating system, it was called Symbian, Nokia's operating system, and there was no app store, and so I'm really at the mercy of this one handset manufacturer.
Yeah.
If you kind of follow that to the logical conclusion where you said, maybe this is not such a great business plan, or was that a bridge too far?
Oh, look, yeah, I think at the time Symbian was slated as going to be the smartphone operating system. And back then there just wasn't even iPhone on the horizon.
No, there was no iOS, there was no Android.
But we didn't think about it. So we honestly didn't map out where were we going to take it. And if we were dependent on one handset manufacturer, what were the other options available to us, and how far were we drilling into research about Android coming out, other open source systems, and when were Apple going to release there, and what were they going to do with their applications? So we really didn't focus on that part. We were just so focused on one thing and just trying to crack at it, even though we were hitting a brick wall all the time. And then the GFC hit us, which I just sort of spelt the end for everything.
Do you think, I mean, we've talked a lot today about failing fast. Do you think if you had failed faster, you would have done things differently?
No, I reckon the overarching thing that we should have done was, there are so many things you can control and so many things you can't. And what we didn't do was stand back regularly and assess what our options were. So when the GFC hit us, we really didn't explore. We just still kept going with what the plan was. The plan was to raise some capital. And we had, like, the investment landscape was different to what it is today. And the handful of investors that we were talking to, they just disappeared. They all completely went underground, as you would. But we should have just stepped back and said what options are available to us. And the iPhone was out by then. So instead of going for the 2 million that we were going for in capital, we could have just raised a smaller round, and we would have been able to do that, built it in the iOS operating system. And today we often speculate whether it would have been a different story, whether we were able to do that.
So you knew the iPhone was out, and so there was a new app, ecosystem emerging, still early days.
Yeah.
And yet you didn't pivot. Why do you think that was the case?
Look, I think because we were just we didn't consider other options. I really don't think that we, as a team, sat down and went, well, it's not the end just because we can't raise $2 million now to do what we need to do or what we thought we needed to do. Why don't we sit down and look at what the pivot opportunities are? We didn't do it. Pivot wasn't a word back then, Alan. Like, people
I know it wasn't a word, but the concept of pivoting.
Wasn't popular.
Let's call it adapting then.
Yeah, no, I know. But now everyone's got pivot in their mind, which is great, because at the moment when you hit a brick wall, people start to go, okay, what else can I do? Which is wonderful. But we didn't have that kind of learning ground. It was different. Like we don't have wonderful things like Google.
I'm not trying to be mean. It was a different era.
Yeah, it felt like I had to go through that to realize.
But I think there's a takeaway for everyone, and that is, don't be so attached to your business model, that you're blind or partially blind to other opportunities.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can still witness startups today that they believe so much in that idea, that business model, and they can get attached to it, and that's often a mistake. There's a fine line between, I guess, being committed and dedicated.
I call it passion and delusion.
Yeah. So it's finding that balance, because you don't want to change course at the slightest upset, because there's no tenacity or passion in that. But on the other hand, hitting yourself against a brick wall for months or years on end is not very nice.
It's really hard. I heard this motivational speaker, Nick Stewart. Have you heard him?
No,
he used to be an ex-NBA basketballer, and he's a really charismatic guy, and tells this great story about when he was a real estate agent. anyway, it comes to the conclusion, and his question to the audience is, what is the one thing? And he's surveyed, entrepreneurs around the world and some of the most successful ones, and some of my favorites, Richard Branson and Warren Buffett. And he asked the question, what is the one thing that entrepreneurs all do? And, we're all stumped. We're just sat there for a moment, and, everyone thinks it's, well, they're investing in the right team, they've got the unicorn or whatever it may be. But the clue is in, well, I'll ask you, what is the one thing they don't do?
Don't do or do?
They don't do. What is the one thing they don't do?
I don't think it's just one thing. The one thing that successful entrepreneurs or unsuccessful entrepreneurs don't do, because I think there's a difference. I think the successful entrepreneurs, in my opinion, are the ones that prioritize, have a very, very clear vision of what they want. That's my view, and that what they want is it's not just limited to the product or their business vision. It's also what they want in their team.
Yeah.
It's what they want in their culture. They're very definite about that.
Yeah.
Almost to the point of being a little bit stubborn about it.
Yeah.
But there's always a but flexible enough also to realize when you need to flex.
Yeah.
So that's what I would observe, but I should ask you that same question.
Well, his answer was they don't lie to themselves.
Yeah.
So that when you said there's a fine line between being focused, what did you say? Focused and committed.
Yeah.
Like I call it passion and delusion.
Yeah.
And there's a point with which you can be so focused on something that you need to give yourself a reality check occasionally and say, is it going to work? And at what point? That's
interesting though, because you hear what people have said about Steve Jobs, for example, and the term reality distortion field comes up all the time with Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
It's like he was in his own. He was so focused on his view. It might be the counterexample to that, but.
Well, I mean, they had to take him out of his own business before he could come back and shine, right? So, I don't know. Was it standing away from it that gave him some clarity?
You never know.
So it's an interesting one.
Well, we're about halfway into Sudo, so I think it's only fair to open it up to some other questions now. So remember, we have a Hangout. Blue Brett back there is dispensing.
Please put your hands up.
And I'm currently blinded, so I can't see anyone where Brett
No one has their hands up yet, Alan.
Oh, really? Now, look, don't be shy. I mean, by the way, there's no such thing as a dumb question. So questions about anything we've talked about, or perhaps something from today's earlier session that you're just keen to bounce off of a real entrepreneur.
Okay, we have one.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, it's hard to see over there.
How do you manage your projects, or how many projects do you have?
How do we manage them? Do you mean how do we prioritize them?
How do they not cause you stress?
Oh God, well, that's unavoidable. Like I think there's always going to be a list of bigger the things that you need to do than the ones than the things that you can do in a day. They're prioritized based on, we prioritize our targets and by the ones which are, I suppose, going to be the most responsive. So at the moment, we're on a big business development cycle. So we're driving all those leads, and regularly, we're taking the feedback about what's coming back, which ones are the most responsive, and channeling our energy into the areas which are showing us the most return, I suppose, or the greatest opportunity. So I think managing the projects, it comes down to greatest opportunity, being super organized, and having the right team of people behind you, which can help you can delegate to, and you can trust them implicitly. And then I use a lot of project management because I have that background principle. So under promising and over delivering is a really great principle. So if you think you can do it, like developers are really bad. Oh, sorry, I don't mean to look at Leo, because they always
No, they are. I'm an engineer.
They're over optimistic about what
we
they can
over
do.
promise and under deliver.
Yeah, so they're always too optimistic. But I mean, even we can be things. There's always going to be problems.
Yeah.
So when you think you can do something, add a fact on there. So if you're delivering ahead of time frames, you look great with the customer. So it's a really great position to be in, and that helps you manage stress.
I would just add, we touched on this theme a little bit earlier today, the absolute importance of understanding the problem you're solving, and then distilling that down into the core requirements, the things you must absolutely do.
Yeah.
Versus the things that are, well, we can get to that in version 2 or version 3 or whatever. So basically prioritization.
Yeah.
Another question?
Alan, just before that question, you referred to Meg as a real entrepreneur. What did you mean by that?
I was going to ask you the same.
Well, sorry. Now, I'm not trying to cause offense. I guess there's an assumption that many of you in the audience are still in the aspiring entrepreneur category and hoping to be entrepreneurs. But I should have asked that question, actually. How many people in the audience are actually in startups or actively?
It's heaps of people.
Quite a few. Great. Okay, well, that's great. So you're all real entrepreneurs in that sense. I think what Meg has, I think what Meg has is multiple entrepreneurial experiences, and I think that's actually quite valuable. For those of us who have done multiple startups, invariably you learn as you go. I'd like to ask a question related to that, perhaps, and that is, I know you're only 2 years into WorkDivision.
Yeah.
You clearly learned a lot from Leopard Labs, your earlier startup, but even 2 years in, I suspect there are things you might do differently. So are you comfortable maybe sharing some of those things?
Sure. This will probably be a bit controversial, but I would have started it in Silicon Valley or New Zealand.
Really?
Yeah. So.
And the reason is?
The reason is.
Or New Zealand.
Yeah, New Zealand. Okay. Look across to our neighbour. They're investing in the angel network and government, opening up barriers to growth there far better than we are, and it's because they're not relying on their resources. Back to the resources again. Obsessed with them. The limited funding here and the employee share structure, although that press release, which came out yesterday, it's great news.
It is great news.
Have been barriers to growth and attracting talent. And that stat, and I've heard you quote this before too, that AvCal released in 2012. In that year, there was 22 million angel investment in Australia. And in the same year in the US, in Silicon Valley, or US in total, was 22 billion. So it just shows you how narrow the investment pool is here. And unfortunately, the growth of startups hasn't been proportionate to investment. So, yeah.
So basically starting the business in a country with, I guess, a more mature startup ecosystem.
Yeah. And for us, we need funding.
Yeah.
So
Most startups do.
Yeah, that's right. Most do, that's right. And, it's really hard here. There's a big gap between, there's plenty of programs to seed an idea, funding from 5K to sort of 50K to start the sprint, but there's not a lot of programs and support to run the marathon, right? That year 2 is when most businesses fail. And it's not a mature investment market here. There's a lack of angel investors, and there's a shortage of leads as well. So, a lead investor pulls together the round. So, yeah, I think, the investment landscape's really challenging.
It has changed a lot in the last few years, though, on a positive note. But in fairness, I asked the question, what would you have done 2 years ago?
Yeah.
My observations is that certainly access to capital has improved. Is it anywhere near on par with the US? No, not yet, but pretty significant improvements in the last few years.
Yeah.
There still seems to be a bit of a gap, not so much for the seed round, but when you grow to the point, your first growth round where you need to go raise $5 million or something, that's probably still a bit of a gap in the Australian funding or VC market.
Yeah.
Ironically, once you get big enough and you achieve global scale, if you need to raise,
they
large,
come looking for you. Yeah, I know.
Is that crossing that chasm of death when you need that $5 million of growth funding? But the situation's improving, so don't despair. It's certainly much improved on a few years ago.
Look, and New Zealand's not far away.
I won't comment on New Zealand.
Yeah.
Any more questions from the audience? We got one back there.
Yes, in fact, very briefly on the statement on seeding, what I Phil, and I'm sure a number of us, and as well, you can appreciate the preceding phase as well, where it's not at that 5 million level. And
5 million is not seed, that's growth.
yeah, okay, but even in the very early pre-seed, where you're not, you're still confronted here in Australia, where one may be slightly apprehensive to approach a VC.
Yeah.
So hence you're faced with the one-on-one, one-for-one that the government may well present itself with to your prospects. But that one-for-one, that one out of your pocket without approaching a VC might be quite a challenge. So I'd like to just ask about what your thoughts are on, tapping into your own pocket for that one.
Oh, right.
Before it becomes, it tops
Yeah,
up
of course.
with
I mean,
the other one. That's so critical to the startup here and here locally. Yes.
Sure.
Thank you.
Look, I think all entrepreneurs in the room have skin in the game. They have sacrificed finances or their lifestyle or, my husband's here tonight and he'll know more than anyone that there's been a personal and a financial sacrifice. But yeah, there's skin in the game, obviously, and you're investing some of your own time and money, and that may be in kind. It may not necessarily be money. It's like you'll quit your job and you'll work free for a period of time, and it's not for free. Nothing's for free, but that's your skin in the game. So yes. And investors like to see that. They like to see that you've invested in either some of your own money, and ultimately and inevitably you will anyway. But you're showing that there's skin in the game. Look, I think it comes back to that point about keeping the end in mind. So if your end vision is to grow the business to X revenue in X years, and you need capital to do that, then don't be afraid to go out and seek it. Like there is opportunity. We were very close to closing a significant round, but we had issues with the Commercialisation Australia grant that got axed, which was going to match us dollar for dollar.
Mm-hmm.
When that got axed, I had to either go back out and fill the round with the matching funds, which is it's a very big distraction to the business. So we decided to take a smaller round instead and sort of build some value in the business. Which is another strategy as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I think investors actually expect entrepreneurs to have some skin in the game. There's nothing more fearful to an investor than an entrepreneur that pays himself or herself a big fat salary and then says, well, I need to raise $1 million. Well, what's that for? That's just to pay your salary. They'll be much more impressed if you've done it off the smell of an oily rag and built that MVP and attracted those first few users or customers. And by the way, if you can do that, you'll be able to establish a much higher valuation and consequently give away a lot less of the company too. So there's something in it for you, the entrepreneur as well. And I think I want to be just counsel against the grass is always greener. I mean, I've done 2 startups in Silicon Valley. Both before the .com bust. The second one kind of was partially during the boom phase. The first one preceded it, and there was still an expectation there that an entrepreneur would be dedicated enough to kind of work at a discount or work off savings to get things going. And then what happened much more recently, when capital became more abundant, was this more recent notion that, well, there's an abundance of capital, the world has changed. And now I think what's happened is we've gone back to a saner funding model where, again, investors are looking to see some commitment on the part of the entrepreneurs. Having said that, investors are also reasonable people. They want to make sure that the founders and the employees can sustain themselves. If they're not paying themselves a living wage, well, that doesn't help anyone, does it? But I think it is really important to kind of do everything you can within your powers early on to essentially get some traction. You have to define what that traction is. It could be your first couple of customers, or it could be if you're a B2C player. You've got your MVP up and running, you've got some users. But that's validation, and that helps investors understand that you're actually you're worthy of investing in. There was another question back there. Oh, there's one up here. Sorry.
So working? Yep. So money's the metric that we use to sort of measure success for startups generally. Having met now quite a lot of entrepreneurs, I'm starting to feel like it's not actually something they're hungry for. It's actually more like a high score sort of thing. I guess I'm curious, two things. One, what kind of motivates you to do what you're doing? Because as you said, you're making a lot of sacrifices. And secondly, what kind of score would you consider would be a success when you kind of sell out a WorkDivision? What is a good thing that, anything below that would be in your mind a failure?
Sure. What was the first part? Was it what are the sacrifices?
Oh, what motivates you?
Oh, motivates
Is it money?
Why
or is
are
it-
you an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
You could be back at Virgin.
Yeah. No,
Virgin's a great company.
look, Virgin would be the only company that, and maybe Google, because of the food.
Because of the food.
Yeah, the food's amazing. You think I'm joking, but it's really great. It's interesting. I don't know that I could do anything else. Like, I really love working with ideas. So, almost on a daily basis, you meet the most extraordinary people, and I'm inspired almost daily. And I know that I'm not earning the salary that you can earn with a corporate, but I know they can't claim daily inspiration like I can. Like, I just love it. We work at Fishburners, and you meet someone new and they've got this great idea. I just love to hear about it when there's new ideas improving people's lives and making us more efficient and generally improving the world. That really is that's the baseline for me, and why I'm so addicted to it. I'm almost addicted to it now. I don't know that I could do anything else.
It's a good addiction, though. Isn't it?
Yeah, it is a good addiction. It is. I just want one of
like
these
coffee.
addictions to pay off for me.
Yeah.
And then my measures of success. So, there's a professional level, I suppose, and a personal. Professionally, for startups, I think there's 3 stages. And I think it's like that first stage of commercializing the idea, monetizing it and validating it. The second one is generating value in the business and sustainable growth. And the third one's taking it through its exit path. And I think if you can break through any of those levels, you're achieving success at some stage. And, that whole fail faster thing, if you're breaking through each stage and you need to pull up stumps and that the business doesn't have legs, you either try and pivot around it if you can, or have the maturity to go, okay, it hasn't worked, and, we're going to walk away for whatever reason. So, but I think if you apply, if you pull every lever and you work every angle so that there's nothing, if you had your time over and you couldn't do any better, then the method you've applied is successful. So in a startup, that's what I see as success. Now, it's different a few years ago. Like, it was all about, taking it through its exit and making a truckload of money. Money's only one small factor which motivates me now in doing this. I want to impact things. I want to change things. I want to create things. Personally, I think success for me is being happy, and I get that from being authentic in my professional and personal life. And if I apply the same method, like if I do everything, I put everything I can into it so that I can have no regrets, then that's my sense of success personally.
That's great. Have no regrets. I think do what you love, and enjoy it.
Yep.
And
Yep.
you're going to make some mistakes, but so what? I mean, you learn from the mistakes.
Yep.
And yeah.
The mistakes
Make a
are good. I
difference.
mean, if you can be open to being self-aware about the good and the bad experiences, like my first business certainly wasn't my finest work, but it was open to learning from it. So even the bad stuff, I really studied it. I studied the bad stuff so I could make sure I'd never do that again. I'd never go there again.
The pattern I often see with entrepreneurs, they stumble across a problem and it just bugs them. It's like, it shouldn't be this inefficient. It shouldn't be this hard. You're solving a problem right now around administration.
Yep.
You probably experienced that problem at some point in your career, I'm guessing.
Yes, still daily.
And it bothered you.
Yeah.
And instead of being bothered and forgetting about it, it bothered you to the point where you said, no, actually, I'm going to do something about this. So having that, yearning to actually not accept the status quo, you could almost say, don't tolerate it, and it can apply to anything. When you look around you, there's so many things about the world that aren't, or are broken,
Yeah.
that can be done better. It's funny, a few years ago, the founder of GoCatch, how many of you have used GoCatch? Ned came to me and said, I'm going to, I'm going to do this thing to make it really, really easy to get taxis. And I was just thinking, I guess I personally wasn't that excited by the problem. And it's a personal thing. It's like disrupting the taxi industry. But actually, it's prime for disruption.
Yeah, I love it.
It really does need to be disrupted. And I think if you look around as entrepreneurs, you can identify lots and lots of opportunities.
Yeah, on a daily basis, you'll hit a problem, and that's the source for me. I kind of have a spreadsheet with them.
Yeah,
every time something annoys me.
Absolutely, yes. Keep track of the things that annoy you, because they could be great startup or product ideas. Yeah, back there.
Hi, you said your sales cycle is about 12 months to like 2 years.
Yeah.
What are some of like the setbacks or the challenges that you face when you approach an enterprise?
Well, for us, if they're a large enterprise, we can have up to 10 different decision stakeholders. So we did a deal with ANZ, and we got all the way through like 6 different decision stakeholders. There was the business one, the IT one, IT risk, IT security. We got to procurement, and they were like last in the chain, and they nearly unhinged the whole deal because we weren't a preferred supplier. So organizations will have the power sits in different places in different organizations. At ANZ, it's in supply and procurement, oddly enough, not with IT, not with the business, who actually need to source the solutions. I think I've forgotten your question. What are the challenges with enterprise?
With a long
sales cycle. So the challenge is how many decision stakeholders and how long it takes to get through that. So that's one of the reasons it's so long. Missing the timing and the funding cycle is the other challenge. But how do we counter that? So we're trying to go for mid-market, smaller, agile businesses that can use the solution. They're not such bigger deals, but they're more open to, I suppose, taking on an innovation. So financial services and government, while they're the sweet spot for us, we represent risk to them. So I can see it in their eyes when I sit in front of them, like, will she make me look better or worse, better or worse? It's all about making a risk-based call for them. But smaller mid-market have less of a risk aversion, or that's the tactic that we're taking at the moment, which will hopefully counter the longer sales cycles with big enterprise.
I guess, have you considered partnering with a large?
Absolutely,
yeah, okay.
Absolutely. We're in the process of looking at a number of partnerships, because I think our future will be linked to a strategic partnership.
And possibly your exit too, dare I say.
Ideally. I call it the pathway to the exit, which is if we can get a strategic partner to invest in us, and they're already working with our target clients, and they can push it through their existing channels, and then potentially acquire the technology. That's a really great strategy.
Because that's another mitigation strategy. You can let your partner carry some of the burden for those long sales cycles, and I guess having lots of deals in the hopper too.
Yes, yeah, we've got a ton of them.
Yeah,
it's a numbers game.
There was a question up here.
Hi, Meg. Thanks for your time. I just wanted to know more about sort of your culture that you're trying to create today, and sort of what would you bring from Hutchinson and Virgin, and what you wouldn't bring.
Sure. I've imitated the Virgin culture. So we do, our culture is really important to me. It's really important when at Virgin as well, when they were choosing people, they might have had the appropriate skill set, and they might have been absolutely qualified, but if they didn't have the culture fit, they wouldn't hire them.
Mm-hmm.
So culture is everything. I want to create a culture that's similar to what we're offering. I talked before about the flexible work hours. So this future of work concept, I would love to see us be a use case. Why work conventional hours? Work the hours that suit you, so long as you can deliver on your commitments, and so long as we do come together as a team. That's important. We saw Yahoo do a flip on that. They wanted their workers not to be in the office to cut operating costs, but then they realized they weren't collaborating and being creative enough. So flexibility is really important. Integrity in doing what we say we're going to do, sort of top of my list. I'm often miffed when I meet with people and they say, I'll do these things for you, and they don't do them. I don't understand it. Like, don't say something if you're not going to do it. So that's that's sort of high on our list of things. Quality, integrity, do what we say we're going to do. Culture, you must have fun. You must enjoy what you're doing. If you don't, then you know, leave the team, or if it's not working for you.
I think I just add, you're clearly someone who's very passionate about what you're doing, and that passion will instill passion in others. So, but you need to get that response, you know, and if someone doesn't reciprocate, then you know, they're probably not the best culture fit. So
yeah, they've got that you know, understanding the investment of effort versus you know, reward. So how much effort you expend and what you put into it's what you get out of it is also sort of part of the culture. So that, yeah, really believe in those sort of values. But a lot of them I've simulated and evolved them from the Virgin culture. So it was a really great learning ground. If you can get in with a corporate like even Google, who spins off
Google
who spins off
oh,
startup.
thank you. That's most generous of you.
Startup ideas. I mean, Virgin will spin off a startup, and you know, I went to South Africa to work on a Virgin Mobile startup. There were just a team of 20 of us, but they they had a real work hard, play hard mentality, which was awesome. Like everyone worked really hard. You weren't paid market rate, but there were so many parties. I couldn't go to all of them.
Good problem to have.
Yeah,
I'd probably just add to that, Meg's actually said this, perhaps not in so few words, but culture is something you design. It's not left to chance. You've actively said, look, this is the culture I want, and you treat it like any other design problem. So these are the values that are important to my organization, and these are the values I'm going to seek to replicate.
And look for in the people.
And look for in other people. So we're down to the last few minutes. Was there another question? I saw I might have to ask a question then. So what do you think? I mean, we've got a lot of people out there in the audience that are in various stages of starting companies and running companies. A few that are perhaps not yet actively in a startup. What would be your advice to those who are on the fence and have not yet started?
Okay. My advice would be, if you're passionate about something and you've got a problem and you believe that it's going to solve something or make something better and improve the world, then build an MVP. Understand, you know, what you need to do to actually get your first minimum viable product out there, and go for it. If you're on your own, you may want to look at getting a co-founder, because if you haven't done this before, the easiest way, instead of reinventing the wheel, is to partner with someone who has done it before and who can help you take on some of those, or short circuit some of the learnings or the failings that you might make along the way. So I think if you have an idea and you want to go for it, and your finances can cope with it and your partner can cope with it, and you think you're willing to give it a shot, like what's the biggest risk? Like, what's the worst thing that can happen is that it doesn't work and you've got a great learning and you move on to something else. If that's the worst thing that can happen, then what's stopping you?
That's great advice. And for those in the audience that have started down the entrepreneurial pathway, what would be your top piece of advice?
Oh, top piece of advice. Board of advisors. That's my thing of the moment. Finding advisors who are networked in your target markets or in your technology space that can open doors, grow the business for you faster than what you can do just you know, chipping away at it on your own, is probably one of the biggest learnings I've had. I've had some great inroads with some advisors around me that have opened doors, have given me advice, have been there when, you know, moments have been really tough. So I'd probably, board of advisors, if you don't have one, go find one or team of them.
That is
no more than 4.
Excellent advice. And by the way, once you get a couple of 1 or 2 good advisors on your advisory board, you'll probably find they attract other high quality advisors too. So really target getting someone who's really, really good.
Yes.
And as you say, someone who understands your market. Well, we're officially out of time, so please join me in thanking Meg for coming up here and joining us tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. That's great.